Welcome back to another episode of Illuminating Information, the podcast where we shine a light on the cutting-edge ideas shaping the way we work and innovate. Today, we're diving into Retrieval-Augmented Generation, also known as RAG, a technique that combines enterprise search with generative AI, such as LLMs, to produce answers grounded in real, authoritative data. Joining me today is Joshua Cole, Mindbreeze's head of technical sales, and we'll be exploring what RAG is, why it's critical for enterprises, and how Mindbreeze uses it to deliver trusted, context-rich insights. With that, let's jump into the conversation. Hi, Josh, and thank you so much again for joining us today. Before we get into our questions, could you briefly introduce yourself and what you do here at Mindbreeze?
Yeah, hi, Brittany. Thanks a lot for the introduction and for having me on the podcast. So I've been working at Mindbreeze now for almost 10 years, working primarily in sales and pre-sales. And my main role here is ensuring customer success throughout the course of proof of concept projects and other projects, all the way from the initial scoping meetings and presentations through to their first go live, with a focus from my perspective on all of the different technical aspects of our product and the configuration, and making sure that we get everything set up appropriately, exactly as the customer wants and needs. And this includes every component throughout our tech stack, including RAG and LLMs.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. And as we get into it, for listeners who are new to the concept, can you explain exactly what Retrieval-Augmented Generation is?
So Retrieval-Augmented Generation, also known as RAG, is an architecture and a process which combines elements from information retrieval, so that would be searching over your enterprise data, and then generative AI, i.e. the output and the answers that you see from LLMs. So when a user submits a query or a question in natural language, we effectively take the highly relevant search results that we find retrieved via our similarity search, and we take these results and inject these directly into an LLM prompt. This is then sent to an LLM, and the LLM can rely on all of this real-world, up-to-date document content and information relevant specifically to this user's query, and the LLM can then use this to generate a reliable and a constrained answer specific to this user's query. When these two elements are combined together like this, the resulting output is actually far greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm. And why isn't generative AI, such as just an LLM, alone enough for enterprises specifically?
So there are actually a few major reasons why Gen AI by itself isn't sufficient for most enterprises. Firstly, we need to look at the knowledge and the information the models themselves have access to. So trained models are actually fairly static and have a distinct knowledge cutoff point. An example of this would be if a model is trained in 2025, for example, it won't actually have any access to any data about anything which has happened in 2026. In addition to this, none of these models will have access to a lot of the corporate data which an enterprise is truly interested in. So if a company hasn't published something on their website, a model such as Llama or Gemma won't actually have any knowledge of it. This is why RAG is so powerful, because we can feed it accurate, up-to-date documents and information directly to the LLM, and we don't need to rely on what the model's training data was for this information retrieval and for highly accurate and useful answers. But actually another area generative AI by itself falls behind on is to do with access control and traceability. So with pure Gen AI, it can't reliably provide source documents or citations along with its answer, meaning the user's not going to be able to manually verify any information that they receive. And this is actually an aspect which is vitally important in many areas, in many enterprise-level use cases. Information that an employee or a person in an enterprise-level use case is interested in and wants to use an action has to be verified before it can be actioned. And in the same sort of at the same sort of level, in addition to this, Gen AI has no access control awareness, which means even if a company had the time and the expertise and the willpower to train a whole model by themselves on their own private data exclusively, there would still be no way for that model to ensure that the answers and the information that it provides back to the end users is access controlled. Whereas access checking and traceability is something that we can actually do with RAG with great ease. And it's with this traceability and the direct data source injection that we can reduce or completely eliminate the model's typical tendency to hallucinate. And we can then give the end users confidence and understanding about exactly where their answer is coming from.
Interesting. And I know that there are two different types of RAG as well, agentic RAG and traditional RAG. What is the difference between the two? And could you describe how a agentic RAG workflow operates in practice versus traditional RAG?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. Agentic RAG is a larger and larger topic. So if we just take a quick look at just what, let's say, traditional RAG looks like. Traditional RAG is fairly linear with either limited or no decision making along the way. So in this case, a user will ask a natural language question. This will be then sent to the system, and then the system will perform vector and keyword retrieval to retrieve all of the different semantically relevant sections. These retrieved chunks are then added to the prompt, which is then ultimately sent to the LLM. So this LLM receives the prompt, and based on this prompt, the LLM will generate a single response, which is sent back to the user. So it's one very streamlined but simple pipeline, in almost like let's say a waterfall approach with no decision making along the way. So there's no chance for it to branch out. Mm-hmm. On the contrary, agentic RAG is much more proactive, and it can employ autonomous reasoning and orchestration. So in this case, when a user asks a question, in traditional RAG, it would just take that question and go through the process until it's ready to send an answer back, and that process is predefined. Whereas with agentic RAG, the first step that an agentic RAG system may do is to decompose that query into composite parts. For example, what effectively the agentic RAG system is asking itself, what elements of the user's natural language query are to do with constraining the data source, which parts are maybe instruction sets, and so on and so forth. And after it's done this decomposition, it's going to then decide what to retrieve based on this user's query. And that might be, for example, automatically activating different search filters or automatically constraining to specific data sets in the foreground. It will iteratively refine the return search results based on all of this information, along with perhaps additional information in the background. For example, the previous conversation that the user has been having with the LLM up until this point. And then on top of that, it can also call tools or structured data systems in addition to that. So that could be things like external widgets. It might see in the user's query that they're specifically interested in one particular customer. The agentic RAG system may see that this one customer in the system or in the index, has geodata associated with it. It may then send this geodata to a mapping widget, and this map widget is displayed to the end user as well. So it's effectively, you can think of agentic RAG as the system effectively doing the same kind of thing that normal RAG does or traditional RAG, but really decomposing the user's query into lots of different parts, sending them away to different systems, different tools and components, so that the end result to the end user is much more enriched, visually interesting, and helpful.
And is that calling like two different systems? Is that integrated into agentic RAG in the coding process, or is it something that like is intuitive and learned as people use it?
It can be a bit of both. Typically, it is quite hard-baked into the system, this tooling that's available. Of course, the tools do need to be made available to the Agentic RAG system, so that, and the Agentic RAG system needs to know that they exist. So in that sense, it is it's fairly hard-baked, but the decisions that the Agentic RAG system will make, that is something that is done much more on the LLM and on the Agentic RAG side. So the decision-making process and being able to dynamically display different information in the same front-end system to the end users, this is all done dynamically via this system.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. To go a little bit further into it, what technologies underpin the retrieval part, like the vector search and the natural language question answering?
So when we index data, regardless of where it comes from, we run a sentence transformation model on the full content and some metadata, for example, the title of every single document that we index or every single indexed item. This allows us to perform a so-called similarity search over each of these documents' contents at query time. When an end user then enters a query or a question in natural language, we can then find and identify all of the content snippets from these indexed documents, which are semantically similar to the user's query. The content snippets we find aren't just limited to one per document, by the way. We could definitely find several highly relevant content snippets which all come from just one or two documents. Mm-hmm. But what we're actually interested in now is finding this highly relevant semantic data and specifically the answers to the user's queries and returning this to the user. In essence, we've moved beyond simple search and find and simple, so to speak, keyword search, where only a whole document would be returned as results. Whereas now we're much more interested in the real semantic information and the semantic meaning, and then ultimately the real answers and the fact-finding.
Yeah. And how does Mindbreeze integrate Agentic RAG into its product Mindbreeze InSpire?
So in Mindbreeze InSpire, we have integrated Agentic RAG in several ways into the Mindbreeze InSpire product. One of the most exciting, which has been released in our new 26.1 release, is called the Workplace. The Workplace is a fully interactive portal where users can interact with their data in an unprecedented way. And all users will start at the welcome screen, but then based on the user's query and the real meaning behind their query, really what they're really trying to ask and what they're trying to see, the Workplace will then on the fly generate completely new touch points for these users. What that means is, as I was mentioning earlier in regards to what the difference is between Agentic RAG and more traditional RAG, the user's query is decomposed, then the understanding behind the intent of the query is extracted, and based on the intent of the query, different what are called so-called touch points are created and generated and shown to the end user. And a touch point may be a completely different view of the data with different 360-degree views for the data, a completely different layout. So depending on whether a user is asking about one data set or a different data set, depending on how they specifically phrase their query, they may see their data represented in a completely different way to meet their needs precisely and exactly.
Yeah, like the difference between asking for an update on project A versus a specific component of process A, the data would be shown differently.
Exactly. So if you ask for specifics about project A, you may then see a project 360-degree view with it constrained specifically on project A. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you ask about who are the team members for project A, you're not going to see a 360-degree view on the project. Rather, you're going to see a list of all of the employees within your company, but this list is going to be automatically constrained to project A. So all of these different views exist. So, the view which shows the list of employees, or the view which shows project 360s, but it's this query, this natural language query decomposition to be able to understand the intent, which then automatically generates these touch points and automatically constrains the exact data sets that you want to see based on your query or your question.
Yeah. And kind of going into that, and everybody's always concerned about data security, especially when it comes to projects and anything that could be sensitive. How do we at Mindbreeze ensure compliance and trust?
That's a really, really good question, because compliance and trust are really paramount and have always been of the utmost importance to Mindbreeze and to our customers. Ensuring end users only see the documents and the data that they're allowed to see is something Mindbreeze is exceptionally experienced with and good at. And it's been something that we've been doing since the company's inception over 20 years ago. So unlike pure generative AI directly with an LLM, for example, information access through Mindbreeze RAG is fully access controlled. Mm-hmm. This means that the data and the information which we index always includes all of the access control list and necessary authorization information directly from the data source from where it was indexed. This means that when a user asks a natural language query or any query, and we retrieve those semantic snippets from our index, which are used as the building blocks in our RAG answers, the very first step is actually making sure that the end user has the authorization to see those different building blocks. If they don't have that authorization that's required, those building blocks are simply not included in the prompt which is sent to the LLM. So there's absolutely no chance for any information leakage, or there's absolutely no chance a user will ever see any data or information that they're not allowed to, because it's quite simply not retrieved right at the start. And actually, in addition to this, Mindbreeze InSpire and our RAG service supports a wide range of LLM connections. And one type of LLM connection we support is fully on-premise, including fully self-hosted models, which means that if a customer's company demands the absolute highest level of data security, they can still enjoy and leverage the full power of Mindbreeze InSpire RAG with a system which has absolutely zero connection to any cloud or internet service. And all of the data, including all of the data that's sent to the LLM model, stays completely within the Mindbreeze InSpire instance.
Mm-hmm. So that would be customers like in government that have highly regulated security. Exactly.
Very, very high security requirements if they have to conform to different regulations. So one of the typical things is that it doesn't matter to a lot of customers in such examples how well encrypted the data is. It simply cannot be in transit across the internet. It cannot be sent to any cloud service. And in those instances, we can, of course, provide a completely on-premise LLM. And that means that all of the data, all of the generative AI answers and everything to do with RAG, it all stays in the same place. It doesn't go anywhere. It simply stays within their network, and the users are still able to fully leverage and enjoy Mindbreeze InSpire to the fullest.
Yeah. Not necessarily about government customers, but what benefits do you see, at least, from customers using RAG?
Mm-hmm. So with RAG, our customers are effectively seeing an incredibly powerful combination of two already powerful components in the semantic search and generative AI, and they're reaping the benefits of both combined. So with RAG, especially in combination with our workplace and with agentic RAG, customers are seeing increased productivity gains. They can make much better informed decisions far more quickly, and they have a reduced risk in doing so. They're able to leverage faster information discovery with a lower requirement on manual document reviewing, and they can read answers backed up by source evidence, pointing not only to the document specifically, but the actual paragraph or the sentence which has been used to generate the answer that they were looking for.
I just want to clarify that that's in the Mindbreeze Insight workplace, correct? Where it has the document and the specific paragraph within the document cited in each of the natural language answers, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So that's in the workplace, and that's within our, so to speak, our answers widget. So that where we display the citations and then point directly to the specific paragraph or sentence, that's something that our customers can leverage and use in our workplace. But that's also available out of the box as a standard widget as well. So this citations widget is also available in other integrations.
Awesome.
But just to continue along the route of the workplace, so with the workplace, they can actually leverage Agentic RAG to automatically see powerful and dynamically chosen data overviews and data insights, as we mentioned before, shown to them purely on the basis of their natural language query, all from one single entry point, the welcome screen. And that means that customers with a wide variety of different end users with different business needs and different requirements can all start from one very familiar welcome screen, and then based on the user's query and their needs, everything that they need to see is then inferred directly from their query, and then they get to start their insight journey and view the different touch points relevant to them in their query.
Yeah, and if anybody listening is interested, the Insight Workplace is really interesting, and the insight journeys and touch points are like word specific to Mindbreeze. And if you go on to our website, you can understand more what that means. But it's very interesting and very cool. Not what this podcast is about right now, but everybody should go check it out.
Yeah, I agree.
And then also, I feel like with this podcast, we always like to look ahead because AI is always moving so quickly. So where do you see RAG and enterprise AI heading in the near future?
Yeah, so that's a really, really big question and fairly difficult to answer, especially when you consider where we were as an industry maybe 2 or 3 years ago and where we are now. So it's difficult to estimate what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, but it's definitely a very exciting time to be working in the industry. It's difficult to see the trajectory of advancement, so to speak, whether the level or the speed of advancement is just going to continue accelerating, or if it's going to level off, or if it's going to reach a plateau anytime soon. But I think what we have seen, let's say in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, is the steady improvement of Gen AI models. And I don't expect that to stop anytime soon. So with every new version of these models, such as, let's say, Llama or Gemma, we always get new opportunities from our perspective because we're working with these models. We get more power to work with, a far more intelligent understanding of the input prompts and the user's query. And of course, these models are always increasingly better optimized in terms of speed and performance. And I think we can actually expect more of the same in the future. So a progressive, continuous improvement of these models, which gives us just more flexibility, more power to leverage all aspects of our RAG in our Mindbreeze InSpire product, and especially with a key focus on Agentic RAG. I think we might see much more power and flexibility in the regions of task-level agents and workflow automation as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. Agentic is where everybody is looking towards. But thank you so much again, Josh, for joining us and giving us your expertise on this topic. RAG, I think, has become so integral in enterprise AI. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Be sure to subscribe to Illuminating Information on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a question, topic you would like us to cover, or know someone who would make a great guest on this podcast, reach out to us on our website and let us know. Stay innovative, stay informed, and as always, keep illuminating information.